Again, it's Friday, and that means another edition, number 45, believe it or not, of the Zogby Report, Real and Unscripted. This is a weekly thing where I, John Zogby, and my son, Jeremy, obviously the boomer, obviously the millennial, take a look at some of the big news of the week and share our thoughts about it, often from two different points of view, but sometimes not. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to start it off, and this just hit me maybe about 10 minutes ago when I was in the parking lot. So in many ways, this is really spontaneous and unrehearsed. So the election is over. People have voted. We have a president-elect. And so here is the question, now that the election is over: whither American democracy? Now the question is, how are we going to spell whither? If it's W-H-I-T-H-E-R, it's suggesting, where does American democracy go? Or is it W-I-T-H-E-R, meaning that it's falling apart, withering away? You want me to start, or do you want to?
Well,
how would you spell it?
Well, remember, you went to Catholic private school. So I didn't. So why don't you start?
All right. Okay. Are you taking a shot at public schools?
Yes.
Okay.
At least my experience.
All right. So, I'm the optimist in the room. So I will say whither, W-H-I-T-H-E-R. I can see where some people wondered about whether our democracy, not our democratic values, but our democracy, was being challenged. But, when you take the ultimate measures of a democracy, I think we did well. So, first of all, a peaceful change in government. Yes. Yeah, I realize that Donald Trump has not officially conceded, but the handwriting is on the wall. I know that he has not yet authorized, or his people have not yet authorized, the transition monies, the transition documents, the usual welcome to the new team. But, that is in the offing, and the vice president is getting the information that he needs. But, we have polled elections, very close ones, that we've gotten right in Mexico, and in Albania, even in Iran. And in every one of those cases, we have seen where the election has actually worked. When we did the 2000 election in Mexico, the question was, will the ruling party for the previous 70 years peacefully hand over power? And they did. And then when we polled in Albania, 2007, it all came down to one seat in the legislature, and there were vocal battles and fisticuffs, but when all is said and done, a peaceful transition to power. For that matter, in Iran in 2000, we had a changeover in government, arguably the same establishment power structure, but there was a peaceful transition, meaning that in terms of the public mind, there were remnants of democratic values. But here in the United States, I think you're seeing a grudging but growing acceptance of the results of the election. How would you spell whither?
Well, I didn't know about the W-H-I-T-H-E-R.
Okay.
At least I don't remember it. But I'm watching closely. Mm-hmm. Things are up in the air for me. I look at the rush to declare Biden, and of course the numbers. And if you look at the numbers on whether it's realclearpolitics.com or really any news source. You see the number and it's over, right? Mm-hmm. But Trump and of course the question is how much of the Republican Party, as of today, it looks like maybe they're not going to go with him on challenging the results. A couple days ago, it looked like they were behind him. So it's just all slowly unfolding. And it seems to be that the last 4 years, whatever the major issue of the day was, there were so many twists and turns. I mean, the last 4 years have really been like a spy thriller. Twists and turns and drawn out, and just when you think there's a conclusion, there's a surprise. I would say that has probably been the overarching theme of the Trump presidency, and it makes me question, why would it end now? What if there is some indisputable evidence, whether it's just in an isolated state or it's in a few states, substantial evidence emerges? I'm watching. I go back to the first thing I said, the rush to declare. I mean, really, within 24 to 48 hours, there was the rush to declare a Biden presidency, which we have to say isn't the job of the media. I mean, that's going to be determined in December when the Electoral College gathers. But I'm just watching it unfold. If you ask me right now, I don't seem to think that it's necessarily in the bag. I've been using the words, we're not out of the woods yet. So I'm carefully watching.
Okay, so let's look at it from this angle, okay? So as of this moment, here we are, November 13th, the overall Biden lead in the popular vote is approaching, or maybe has even hit 5 million, a differential. Now, we all agreed that it is still possible for someone to win the popular vote by 5 million and lose the election. Thus far, the Electoral College in the states that have been declared, clearly put Biden over the top. But Georgia and Nevada, you know the drill. Those are all pretty close. But I think the interesting thing, and what makes me take the position I have taken, is that the worst aspects of this scenario have not played out. And what are the worst aspects? One thing for the president to not concede, and for that matter for his fellow Republicans to line up behind him, which, as you point out, is being chipped away at. It's a whole other thing that we thought there would be trouble in the streets, that the militias would be out in full force, Black Lives Matter on the other side out in full force. And while there were hints of that within 24 and 48 hours, here we are 10 days later, and that scenario hasn't played out. Now, there's a poll that was taken that shows that 80% agree that Joe Biden won the presidency. 3% agree that Donald Trump won the presidency. So it seems as if the strength of the institutions, the public opinion that we worried about being so disparate, is that sort of thing may not be playing out after all, and we've had, or on our way to, a peaceful transition of power. That's why I'm upbeat now.
Well, when I hear you say that, it's comforting and it's believable, right? Because I mean, it's especially the point that the fears that so many Americans had leading up to Election Day, and all of our concern that whether it was within hours or 24 hours that there would be rioting, whatever side, right? Whatever side was declared the
It looked
the victor.
inevitable.
It looked inevitable, and so that's very comforting. But it just goes back to, not only was 2020 a bizarre year, but 2016 to 2020 were bizarre. But 2020 was really the icing on the cake. It just almost seems befitting that the last business quarter of 2020 is the cherry on top.
Yeah.
And so is the cherry on top the WHITHER, or is it the WITHER?
I don't know. We've talked about this before. Make no mistake about it. Trump was not repudiated. You know, you can call it 5 million votes. You can call it 3.5% or lead or whatever it is. The fact of the matter is there was a big vote on Election Day.
Yeah.
And as we saw, the Democrats lost seats in the House, and they picked up so far a net seat in Georgia. And of course, the whole world, and I can tell you, the whole world's focusing on Georgia.
Yeah.
I've been getting calls from, well, the Singapore, Estonia, everywhere about what's going on in Georgia. With that said, we still have two co-equal worldviews going on here, but I guess it's a blessing that the violence hasn't materialized, or the challenge to the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, you have heard some signals, and I think it was it, correct me if I'm wrong, Newt Gingrich or somebody high up in the Republican Party or the Republican establishment said that 2020 is could very well easily go to the Republicans in terms of a backlash against the 2020 Biden victory, especially if Biden rules with a mandate and proceeds, forward with the Biden-Harris agenda and toppling Trumpism.
Here's what we know. What we know is that despite probably having won a majority, Biden does not really have a mandate. He's going to have to build on that mandate, and that's where the interpersonal skills come in. That's where the art of the deal comes in. That's where Joe Biden, and maybe no one else, comes in. He's got the capacity to backslap, to shake hands, to big smile, to have a drink, to do old-fashioned politics. We'll have to see if it works. But where things stand right now, he's got a bare majority of the House. He's got blockage in the Senate, and he's got a looming problem within the Democratic Party. You're hearing AOC saying it's time for him to be bold and to move forward. You're hearing Democrats who had won in 2018 in the House and lost in 2020, saying that the reason why they lost was because of the Green New Deal, the AOC agenda, the fear of socialism. We may have even seen that in our own district here once the votes are counted, that a Democrat who had won in 2018 in a moderate district has lost to a very conservative Trump populist. We'll have to see.
So, going back to Poli-Sci 101, I remember one lecture in particular where the case was made by the professor that, and I think this was referring to modern politics, but maybe it could be American, the entirety of American history of elections. But the tendency was that the candidate, especially if there's an establishment candidate, campaigns as a moderate. But then when elected, it goes in the direction that they've always had the tendency to go in. And then you factor in the notion of the imperial presidency, which is a growing trend, especially in the modern presidency, and the phenomenon of executive order. So going along with the notion of a Biden presidency, which it looks to be today, even though you're saying that he doesn't have a coalition, and it's going to be difficult because there's still the Republican Senate, and the House is divided. I mean, isn't there the potential for executive orders, given the modern imperial presidency, given the trend of presidents campaigning as moderates, but then going back to their political leanings and tendencies? And then you factor in what you said, you've got this whole up-and-coming base, like, Ilhan Omar, Tlaib, and AOC, basically in unison saying it's time to be bold. That's the future of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing.
All right, so there's a lot there. First and foremost, presidents are either given opportunities or denied opportunities based on the basis of what is happening. So Barack Obama was elected with a mandate and then faced the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Bold initiatives had to be put on hold, and he had to play defense and catch up, with the economic stimulus package and so on. Healthcare had to wait until the next year. In Biden's case, what's staring him in the face right now is COVID, more than anything else. So maybe very hard to come out with new initiatives until COVID is under control. We'll have to see. The other problem that Biden faces is that we have had government, unfortunately, by executive orders. That's because we've had stasis in Congress. And we can expect more stasis in Congress unless Joe Biden is a more persuadable character than we think. So his executive orders will happen on the first day, but essentially they will be executive orders that Barack Obama had to establish because he couldn't get them through Congress, that Donald Trump rescinded via executive order, that Biden will then rescind Donald Trump's. Now, will Biden go beyond those 5 or 6 areas in issuing executive orders or not remains to be seen. But Biden, make no mistake about it, is going to have a very difficult time with Congress, even if they win the 2 seats, Democrats in Georgia.
Yeah, I think the Obama analogy is probably the closest to a perfect, because as he pointed out, he started office and then immediately there was the crisis, right? Now, the critics of the stimulus and the TARP and the Wall Street bailouts, well, that's why they criticized it, right? Because it was basically put on the American taxpayer to hold up the fat cats that created the problem in the first place. Now, the critics of the stimulus always point to the philosophy that, when we're dealing with intricate systems, whether it's economic or even life, our biological systems, when it's sick and ill, to inject it with the equivalent of steroids, or stimulants is really just, packaging over the problem and not getting to the root of it. But as I already alluded to, the criticism behind the stimulus and the bailouts was it didn't get to the root of the problem, being the banks who created the problem in the first place. So Obama's presidency started with the stimulus, and I see the analogy that instead of the economic crisis, as you pointed out, Biden's presidency is starting out with COVID-19. And Biden has already alluded to the fact that under his presidency, it is likely that there would be a national lockdown. That could be, I don't know, we've heard the science advisor, his name is slipping me, but a couple days ago, 4 to 6 weeks to avoid COVID hell. So it's just fascinating to think that Biden's presidency starts with such boldness that how does that boldness then go away over the years, right? You see where I'm going with this?
I do. Obviously, we're going to have to see it all play out. We're going to have to see where we are with COVID in January, but what it looks like, at least for now, things are getting worse. The bell-shaped curve is at the peak of the bell, and we'll have to see over the next few weeks if it even gets worse. Most health experts are suggesting COVID hell, that it is going to get worse. But for now, in terms of policy and in terms of mandate, Biden is going to have to be very, very cautious. And I don't think he's inclined to move to the left. On the other hand, there is some payback that he has to give to those in the left of his party. Often, what presidents have done, Jimmy Carter, for example, is do the symbolic thing on the left. Go after the, issue some executive orders that please the left wing. Make a couple of appointments, but that please the left wing, but try to govern as much as possible from the center. We'll have to see. I think our time is up, and I think for now we've raised a few issues and suggested to folks out there, either those who are ardent Trump supporters or those who are ardent Biden supporters, that this is still playing out. I'm the optimist. You're watching closely.
Yeah.
Let's call it a week.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Now, we have a book that Jeremy is writing. He's compiling the intelligentsiers into a book with a new introduction based on what's happened recently. And I have an op-ed that is appearing in Miami Herald on what happened with the polls, and that we'll be sharing with folks. We love to hear from you. Write to us, and we'll keep the conversation going.
As always, take care.